Welcome to another episode of the Sipping and Tripping podcast, where we connect with amazing people. Today's topic is premenopause, unresolved trauma, and reclaiming vitality. I am your host, Desmond Black, and the person that's sipping and tripping with me today is a therapist who helps leaders, founders, and business owners build resilience and prevent burnout. This is for women juggling complex lives who feel overwhelmed. My guest today is none other than Miss Philippa. Is it Philippa?
Philippa.
Okay. Yeah, Philippa.
Philippa.
Philippa Scott. How are you doing today? And how's your
I'm
weekend?
I am fabulous. Thank you. I did actually have a lovely weekend. I spent some of it doing my own podcasts and other pieces exploring a new business. So it was I don't do weekends like most people do as an entrepreneur. I don't think you take time off in the same way, but I definitely had a lovely relaxing weekend, or at
Okay,
least
that's
for me.
good. That's good. So, all right, speaking about podcasts, what's the name of your podcast? What's it about and where can we find it?
I have two podcasts. One is called Unapologetic Edge, and the other is The Family Architect, Parenting by Design Rather Than by Default. And they speak to two different audiences of mothers, essentially. So The Family Architect is for those mums who are, in the thick of the newness of it, young mums up till maybe kids with 12. And then the Unapologetic Edge is designed more for that perimenopausal woman who's got maybe neurodivergent children or teenagers and is in what I call the perfect storm. Both of them are available on YouTube and all the channels. Whatever your favorite podcasting channel is, you can find it.
Okay, that's good. It's good. So one thing about me is, being a podcaster, I like to connect with other podcasters. I like to, network, right? Because community is very important. I've been saying it a lot lately. So yeah, it's good, and I'm very supportive. So that's why I asked you to, let everybody know where we can find yours.
Thank you.
Now, are you married?
Yes, I am. I've been married. I realized yesterday morning I was laying in bed and I realized actually it'll be our 25th wedding anniversary this year.
Oh
And
wow.
so I promptly organized a party.
See, I was just about to ask you how long you was married. That's longevity. My hat goes off to you because I know that's a lot of work.
It's a
So
daily
how
choice.
daily? I'm pretty sure you had your ups and downs, but you smiling right now, so I'm assuming that it's a lot of highs.
Yeah, look, I think it depends on your attitude around a lot of things, and for me, there's definitely a choice to be made every day to put in the work to do the things. And I'm facing a situation right now where my husband is facing some neurological stuff, so his health is declining, and so but I made a promise, right, for better or worse, and in sickness and in health, and right now it looks like his health is going to be a challenge for a period of time. So we're working our way softly and gently through that as best we can.
Well, I love that. I love that because I say this a lot as well. In today's society, right? That's hard for a lot of people to do. They take those vows and they don't live up to them. So I commend you for toughing it out and sticking with your husband, man, because that's powerful and that's what it's all about. That's why I often also say that like marriage ain't what it used to be. For me, you know, marriage isn't the end result for me, but that's just me. It's just because, just seeing what I see on a daily basis, as far as marriages and failed marriages, sometimes that plays a part on your psyche. So, but like I said, I
Absolutely.
kudos to you and I commend you.
Well, thank you. And look up, my husband's parents are still married. I think they've been together close to 60 years, but my parents are no longer married. My dad's remarried, my mother hasn't. But they split up when I was about 26. So
Mm,
they'd been together for about 27 years. So anything's possible.
right. Okay. So do you have any siblings?
I do. Interestingly, I have an older brother who was born back in the day in South Australia when it wasn't the done thing to keep a baby if you were unwed. So my mother adopted my first brother, my older brother, out when he was born, and he still lives in South Australia, and we do know him now. I'm then the eldest of my mum and dad's, and then I have a sister and a younger brother. And my dad's new marriage has my youngest brother, who is just turned 18, and he is younger than 3 of my own children. So that's an interesting, he went to school with my kids, which is an interesting dynamic. But yeah, so all up, there's 5 of us now.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. So where are you from and where did you grow up?
Well, that's a good question too. So I was born in South Australia in a little town called Victor Harbour, and I spent the first 10 years sort of in and out of South Australia, mostly there. A couple of trips to America. I spent 2 1-year trips in America, and then my teen years were predominantly in Victoria, and left there in my late teens and spent the next probably close to 20 years in Queensland, with a couple of trips to New South Wales and New Zealand and so on, in terms of, we lived away for about 5 years of that, but back in Queensland again now for 9 years.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice. So, one of these days I'll go out the country. I've never been out the country, just in the States.
Well,
I mean, I've heard a lot of great things.
I've done 45 states of America, which is more than most Americans have done too. So yeah.
I only been to 15, either 15 or 16 states. So yeah, hey, that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, you're still beating a lot of Americans.
Say it again.
I think you're still beating a lot of Americans in terms of how many states they've been to.
Oh, yeah, I believe you, because a lot of times when I say that to people, they were like, "You did what?" Like they surprised. So, I mean, that's good for me. But it's some states that, like, I've never been to. Like, I've never been to Florida. A lot of people say, "How do you go to 14, 15 states and never been to Florida?" I'm like, I don't know. It just wasn't in the cards, I guess. Now this next question is a big question.
Okay.
Are you religious?
I have a faith, yeah. So my parents were Salvation Army officers, so I grew up in the church, and the church was a big part of our lives. I don't attend a church anymore because I've just found that it just doesn't align. I don't know, the sense of community is gone. It seems to be business most of the time, and so I just haven't found a family that in a church family that feels right for me. So but I still have a faith. For me, it's a relationship rather than a doctrine, I guess.
Right. Now, it's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, whether you find a physical church or you do church virtually, or you just have that community of people where y'all just read from the Bible, study from the Bible, and just worship that way. At the end of the day, it's all about having a relationship with God, right? So, it's not really about a location, right? It's wherever you are, and give praise to God, is church.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I just started my spiritual journey 2.5 months ago. So it's been good. Today I tried a different church. I was just, trying to find the right home. And today was actually, I was surprised, because going into it, I wasn't sure what to expect. And, I had my moments where I'm like, I don't know if I like this, but I was surprised. It was some moments where I was like, wow, okay, why go anywhere else? So it was good. It was good. But again, I'm not sure if that'll be a permanent home for me yet, right? That's something I'm still trying to establish. But it was good. It was enjoyable.
Well, that's good. You should come out feeling nourished.
Right. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And I'm still learning. I'm still building my relationship with God. So that's that. All right. So on this platform, I like to conversate, educate, and entertain. And with that being said, we have so many interesting things we want to discuss today. More so you, because it's more so up your alley. But then again, I'm a natural talker, and I accept all challenges in all conversations. I love anything that's going to bring knowledge and wisdom to myself. So, let's just get right into it. This conversation is for high performing women carrying chronic pressure, unresolved trauma, in a body that won't rest, uh, even when life looks fine on paper. Right? Just to quote you a little bit here. So you support high achieving women in midlife, navigating chronic stress, burnout, and emotional fatigue. But the question is, what made you want to take on that role and that responsibility?
Well, I have lived experience. That was me.
Mm.
That was me 6 years ago. I had my third burnout. You could say I'm a slow learner. It took me a while to learn the lesson. And once I did, and I was able to come out the other side, once I healed that trauma that had kept me stuck there, I was able to then live my life fully. And I actually was able to show up in a better way in business, in a better way with my family, with my husband. All of those things changed when I finally actually saw myself as my best asset. But a lot of us are, it took a long time, and it took some pretty major health scares for me to get to a place where I was willing to put myself first and actually care for myself. I don't think we do that very well. High performing women particularly tend to be stuck in a state of fight or flight, and so they're running all the time, but they for all intents and purposes on the outside they look like they've got it together. The problem is that usually it's run by a belief system that is not serving them anymore. So for me personally, my belief came from my mum's love language. So my mum's love language was acts of service. And as you can imagine, in the Salvation Army, where, everything is about service, there was a huge underlying messaging system that said that to be of value, I needed to be doing. And I internalized that from the time I was very little. And so I was constantly doing to the point of exhaustion, and adrenal fatigue is where I ended up in my third burnout. And it took a while to figure out what was the underlying belief that was driving that level of activity, and then changing it so that I can now stand and say, actually, my value comes from being, not from doing. And I still do a lot. I didn't lose my ambition or my drive or my effectiveness. It just comes from a different place now. It comes from a more sustainable place than where it had been coming from. So that's kind of how I fell into it.
Gotcha. All right, that's nice. That's nice. So let me ask you this: why do women mask unresolved trauma and chronic pressure behind a facade of success?
Well, culture's created a set of circumstances that really set us up that way, and I think Gen X women particularly, and they're the woman that I'm talking to here really, because she's typically, she'll be maybe a bit younger than me, in her early 40s right through to, early 60s. And that's that perimenopause, menopause kind of space. And I saw Google had just put out an article last week, and I haven't fully read it, but apparently Gen X are the most resilient, emotionally resilient population or demographic. And not because they were parented well, but because they were neglected. So profoundly neglected that they just had to figure out resilience. And I think there's a lot of talk about resilience, and I think the word, we use it like it's a really good thing, and it is a good thing to have resilience, but you're only supposed to be in resilience for a short period of time. Resilience is a reaction or a response to a stressor. If you're sitting in resilience all the time, that's when burnout's going to hit you, because resilience should be a response. It shouldn't be a space that you're constantly in. And that's where I'd been. I'd been constantly in this state of resilience, because I'd been cultured that way. You know, it's not okay to ask for help. You need to figure it out and do it yourself. You know, if you don't know what you're doing or how you're doing it, then you're failing. And so as a Gen X woman, we're cultured to be extremely resilient and to need to figure it all out for ourselves. You know, we're the second generation really of women who are you know, we're meant to work, not just raise a family. And you know, there's a whole lot of cultural stuff that sort of sits in the background, and then there's the internal stuff that we picked up from our mums and our dads about who they wanted us to be, and those beliefs that we take on when we're really little, from the time we're in utero through to about 7 years old, they set us up for then how the patterns for the rest of our life. You know, my pattern that I had to be, or my belief that I needed to be doing to be of value, it was there for 45 years. I operated under the same scheme, because, you know, as a child, if I wasn't doing, I wasn't valued by my mum, and I perceived that as not being acceptable or not being loved or getting into trouble, etc. And I watch my mum still, you know, play that out even now with the people around her. But that served me in terms of keeping me out of trouble or putting me in a, you know, in the good books with my mum when I was young. But that no longer served me. The problem is, unless we're conscious of these unconscious beliefs, we don't know what's running our patterns. And so that's why it can take some time to figure out those patterns. And every pattern, though, once you know what your pattern is, every pattern has a few unconscious beliefs that are locking that pattern in, and then we can change them. But, you know, I think a lot of women in this particular age group are running old stories that kept them safe when they were little, but that aren't serving them anymore. It's kind of like they're an iPhone 17 running Nokia 3110 software. You know, you can do a lot of amazing things on an iPhone 17, but if you're running Nokia 3110 software, you can only actually play that snake game, make a phone call, and send a text message. You know, like right. So yeah, we need to upgrade our software, but I don't think we have allowed women to, or we haven't taught women how to do that. And so that's part of my mission.
Okay. Now you had spoke about, you know, the nervous system, right? So let me ask you this: what exactly is nervous system regulation?
Okay, good question. So we all have we're all run by our nervous system, right? The ANS, the autonomic nervous system, runs everything in your body. So your unconscious is in charge of your ANS, and it's running all the pieces, you know, your every chemical reaction, every electrical response in the body. You know, you've never once, I don't imagine, Desmond, had to tell your gallbladder to release bile to deal with your dinner, right? Like your gallbladder just does that thing, and that's because your unconscious is in charge. And look, you know, thankfully that's the case, because if we had to consciously remember all of these things, we'd be dead in 20 minutes, right? Because we just we'd forget something. But thankfully our system, our nervous system, is running all of those things for us. Now, our nervous system is primitive, and it's always on the lookout for it's got two, you know, it's got a couple of different several different spaces, but generally will sit in the sympathetic or the parasympathetic space. So the sympathetic state being, you know, fight or flight, freeze, etc., and the parasympathetic state being calm and rest and digest, right? So we're usually in one or the other. Our unconscious is running that. And for a lot of us, we have unconscious, we have trauma that's sitting in our unconscious that is running constantly. And it's like a videotape loop, and it's like the event hasn't ever come to an end, and I can explain that further later. But what the unconscious is doing is that it's constantly surveilling, are we okay or are we not okay, right? And if your unconscious believes that it's not okay because of past experiences, then it will constantly be sitting in a place of heightened awareness. So any little thing can tip us over the edge, you know. Somebody cuts the toast wrong, or somebody serves you your salad without the dressing on the side, or you ask for sourdough and you got normal bread, or like there's any little thing can sometimes really set us off because it doesn't feel safe. And that might have come back to, I'm not respected, he didn't hear me, he doesn't know what I'm saying. And so but it's a disproportionate reaction to the problem at hand, right? So when we are regulated, it's because the way the system's designed to work is we start at calm. We're supposed to sit at calm. I don't know if you know that, because most of us in the Western world have never experienced true calm. But if you lived in the Amazon somewhere, you'd have periods of calm and you just live there, right? And then you'd have a distressing event and you'd release stress hormones and you'd come up. And then as soon as that event is over, you'd drop back down into calm, right? And then you might have a life-threatening event, I don't know, a big snake or something. You got to run from a tiger, and you release more stress hormones, and you go all the way up to fight, flight, freeze, and then you drop back down when the event is over and you return to calm. That's the way the system is designed to work. The problem is that a lot of us get stuck in that fight, flight, freeze, that state of I'm not safe. And so what we're looking for, and what regulation looks like, is that normal. We have an event, we release stress hormones, we come back down. We have an event, we release stress hormones, we come back down. That's what regulation looks like. It's not never having anything crappy happen. You don't, when you do this work and you've got a regulated nervous system, you don't become a unicorn that farts fairies, right? Like life still happens. Right. But you return and you reset to calm. That's how it's meant to look. So that's what a regulated nervous system looks like. One that can respond with all of the appropriate hormones, and then reset. But most of us aren't there. Most of us are stuck in that fight, flight, freeze because of those trauma loops that are running.
Okay. So what are tools to break free from perfectionism and burnout?
So for most of us, we require a full nervous system reset. We actually require a process to take us from that fight, flight, freeze stuckness into a state of it's over and I'm safe now. So we actually need to in our unconscious and our body, we need to go from a place of I'm not safe to it's over and I'm safe now. And so for me, my go-to tool is a modality called TRTP, the Richards Trauma Process. It's 3 sessions. It's phenomenal. And for most clients, they'll experience rapid reset in as little as 15 days. Sometimes we have an extra session or two, but generally speaking, that most people will get extraordinary results in those 3 sessions. And so we're resetting. We're actually turning off the videotape loop, because what happens if you have a fight, flight, freeze event, this is a bit of a physiology lesson of trauma, right? So I'll get a bit sciencey, but when you have a traumatic event and you go into fight, flight, freeze, you release a bunch of stress hormones, and that instructs the body to shut down systems that aren't required. If you're running from a tiger, you don't need to digest your Wheaties, so your gut shuts down, right? And all of that energy goes from your gut to process the food into your thighs where you can run. Now, parts of the brain also shut down, including the part of the brain responsible for long-term memory. The brain consumes a lot of our daily energy requirements. So that part shuts down. Now, when the system's not in balance, and again, Western world, most of us aren't, we the memory part of the brain can stay in shutdown mode, and it doesn't do its job. It doesn't flick back on and go, oh, well, that's over. Turn it off, throw it into the filing cabinet, pop a date on it. It's over. I'm safe now. It's finished. So it doesn't do that. And so what that means then is that that event is running like a videotape loop in the unconscious 24/7. It's happening now. My mum's hitting me now. I'm about to die now. The fire's coming now, whatever the event was. And so that means the event when you were 3, the event when you were 7, the event when you were 12, 23, 37, whatever, is still running in your unconscious as if it's happening now. Your unconscious then doesn't feel safe. And so your body continues to stay in shutdown mode. So, for me, that came out in particularly at the end, adrenal fatigue. My adrenal glands are responsible for secreting all of that adrenaline and cortisol, etc. So all of those pieces were running constantly because I wasn't safe, not consciously. Consciously, I knew myself to be safe. My unconscious didn't have that same belief. So I was sitting in that space for decades. So what we do with that TRTP is we actually complete the loop so that the unconscious knows that it's over and I'm safe now, and turns off the videotape loop and then files it away, and the whole system goes, oh, it's over, and turns off. And here's the thing, right? Your system, this is what people don't understand, is your system is actually doing the right thing. It is working perfectly. It's designed to keep you safe, and it will do everything within its power to keep you safe. The problem is it's often running from a dysregulated space, and it's not running the patterns that are going to keep you safe now. So you're not broken. Your body and your system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. We just need to complete some things and let it return to calm. And I know that sounds really simple, but it actually is.
Gotcha. So you touched on it a little bit, but what else can you tell us about perimenopause?
Okay, so perimenopause is it's that last huge hormonal journey a woman goes on, where she goes from being able to conceive, and her ovaries produce eggs, and she's fertile. There's hormone shifts and a brain shift that happen during that time. So a lot of people don't know this, but during adolescence, the brain changes shape and it changes. Same thing happens during matrescence, where you go from being a maiden to a mother. So that journey into motherhood changes your brain, literally changes your brain. A lot of things rewire, and the same thing happens again at perimenopause. And so it's a time when hormones can, our estrogen drops. There's, that can mean for a lot of women, lubrication stops, even your joints, all of those sorts of things require estrogen. Every cell in the body has an estrogen receptor. Every female cell in the body has an estrogen receptor. So every cell in the body is looking for estrogen throughout our life. So that estrogen drops significantly. And so there's a lot of repercussions that come from that. And one of the things that happens is that the HPA axis, the axis between some of your pituitary gland, your hypothalamus, and your, oh man, it's gone. See, I'm perimenopausal, so sometimes shit just falls off the plate and I lose a word. Your adrenals. So like the connection between those shortens. So what that means for a lot of women is that their capacity to be resilient and to endure shortens. So the way I explain it is you might have right through your life, you've got this great capacity, and we add these things to it all the time. We have, we maybe add some work life, we add some kids, we add a marriage, all of these things add to our load. And that's fine, because as long as we've got our HPA axis capacity up here, we're good. We can get through. What happens in perimenopause, though, is that this axis this ability to, or the capacity to manage goes like that and it shortens. And so you actually don't have the same capacity anymore. And this is where for a lot of women, they burn their life down. They, you know, there's a lot of perimenopausal divorce. There's a lot of perimenopausal job loss. There's a lot of, you know, women who find themselves restarting their life again because the way it was set up for them has become intolerable and they just can't handle it anymore. And for a lot of people around them, it can feel like a massive shock. And one of the things I coach women around is, how do you become this new person who has better boundaries or only says yes to the things that are actually, you know, going to value add to your life, etc. But how do you do that without burning your whole life down around you? How do you not lose everything and everyone that is important to you in that process? How do you retrain them as well? So did I answer your question?
Yeah. You did. So how should women handle stress during perimenopause?
Well, if they can get a nervous system reset with TRTP first, fabulous. If that's something that is available to them to do, and I do that online with women all over the world. So, and I'm not the only one. There are lots of people out there who do it. But if you can get that's kind of like cleaning the kitchen. The best way for me to describe it is if you go into the kitchen to make a cake and the dishes are in the sink and the dishwasher's full and the bench is covered in stuff and they're just, the ingredients are all over the place, nothing's organized. Going in and making the cake can feel really hard. And if you do manage to make the cake, the cake is a euphemism for personal development or growth or whatever. So if you do happen to make it, but you've kind of got a bit of last night's bacon and onion in the cake somewhere, and it's even more mess at the end, and so the way I describe it is TRTP is like cleaning the kitchen. We're just going to get rid of all the stuff that doesn't serve you. We're going to reset that whole thing, and then when you walk into the kitchen to do some personal development and make your cake, it's easy and it's actually joyful and it probably will work. So it's kind of like that. And then with TRTP, we give you like some cloths and some spray so you can keep the benches wiped down, and some dishwashing liquid so you can keep doing your dishes, right? So you've got the tools to keep doing the ongoing work without having to come back to the cleaner all the time, right? You've got what you need. And so if you can have that reset first, then it makes all of the other stuff better. But if we're talking just plain tools, I teach women how to do a process called dropped energy, and I choose to know statements because they can really, really help you frame things differently. I'll give you an example. When my kids come in and they've had a hard day and they're taking it out on me because, they're teenagers and they're girls and they're neurodivergent. And so, I'm just safe. And so when they come in and they're doing that, I often say to myself, I choose to know that's actually not about me. That's about whatever's going on for them today. And that shifts me from a place of being feeling attacked to, how do I love and parent them through this today? How do I show up for them, right? And it changes everything in my nervous system. I use this one with my mum a lot. I choose to know that's actually not my shit. That's her shit. Right? I actually don't own her stuff, and she gets to deal with hers, and I don't have to take it on. So, so those are just some little things that work. And if we can understand too that there are 4 primary thinking patterns that keep a lot of us stuck, understanding them and giving ourselves space and time to lean in and actually think about what thinking pattern are we in right now. And the 4, the father of positive psychology created the first 3, and then there's just been another one added in. But talk about personal, which is where essentially you think it's all your fault, so you think you're the problem. We have perception, which is where we tell a story about what we think's going on for somebody else, right? Now, I'll give you an example of that. I came home a few weeks back, and my husband was grumpy at our kids, and I'm like, what's the problem? He's like, well, they're only just, we had people coming over. He's like, they're only just doing the floors now, and and I said, why is that a problem? He said, well, when did you ask them? I said, 10 minutes ago. And he's like, oh, he thought that I was way more organized and that I'd probably asked them that morning and then they'd left it all to the last minute, right? So he told himself a story about it. The next one is pervasive, where instead of thinking, okay, well, I've got this one piece right here now with my health that I need to deal with, but my work life is good. My relationships are good. I live in an amazing home. We instead of siloing and go, all right, I just need to work on this one thing, we think everything's a problem. And the last one is permanency, where we think that instead of, well, this is going to be a problem for the next year or 6 months or week, we're like, this is going to be like this forever, right? So we think that the problem has permanency. And am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
definitely a safe space.
The easy way to remember that is I'm fucked, they're fucked, everything's fucked, or it's fucked forever.
Interesting.
Right. So, but once we know that, we can what pattern we're stuck in, and often we tend to be one or two predominantly across our life, but then we can be aware of it, right? And we can pick that up. So what is my thinking pattern here? And then learning to understand that the patterns that have driven us are not necessarily our own story, but they can be something else, and then taking charge and rewriting them. Those I choose to know statements are really good for that. And being okay with saying no, but getting support, asking for help, knowing that you are your best asset. And if you don't look after you, you're going to burn everything down. Because, and this was the moment that really hit home for me. I'd been that mother who, when you go on the plane and they say, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Right.
I was the mother who sat there and went, no way, that's not the kind of mother I am. I'm going to look after my kids first. And then when I had adrenal fatigue, and that came after a scare with a brain aneurysm and other stuff, right? Like I'd had some pretty significant wake up calls that I'd ignored because of these really strong underlying core beliefs. But that last one, I was like, hold on a minute. I've still got a 16, a 15, a 13, and a nearly 10-year-old. What if I'm not here to bring them all up? What if I only get the oxygen mask on 2 of them? Right. That's not serving my family. And I realized in that time that actually I needed to be okay for them to be okay. And I started to prioritize doing the work for myself and looking after myself. And I'm not talking about having a bubble bath or going and get your nails done and all that sort of stuff, right? I'm talking about the genuine work of actually learning what are your patterns, learning, doing the emotional and mental work of rewriting, some stuff, turning off trauma, healing. Those things are the work that we need to do, and looking after our bodies,
Got you. So let me ask you this. What is the difference between active emotions and triggers?
Good question. I'm glad you asked. All right. So we can be triggered or we can be activated. And we use this word triggered a lot in current society, right? When I was growing up, nobody ever used that word. But now we use it for everything, right? But we cheapen it when we use it for everything. If we are triggered, the technical or the way that's actually, what that actually means is that we have brought back an experience from the past into the future, right? So we have, or in our conscious, and our unconscious has gone, oh, I'm back there. So to give you an example, most people will understand, imagine you're a you know, you've come back from a war scenario, and you hear a gunshot, or you hear a helicopter flying overhead, or whatever. You might experience a panic attack, or you might experience PTS flashbacks, where you are taken back to that moment, you know, maybe when a helicopter dropped out of the sky, or you know, whatever. Like you're taken back to that moment, and your nervous system responds as if it's happening now. So you know, your heart rate increases, and you might sweat or panic and fear, etc. And that can happen in lots of ways. I remember a client calling me once after our second session we were talking at our third session, and I said to her, "How did you go over the last week?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm still being triggered by my mum." I'm like, "Explain that to me." She said, "Well, I had a conversation on the phone with my mum, and I got really cross because she was talking to me like I was a little girl." And I said, "Okay, but did you feel like you were a little girl in that moment, or were you feeling like a grown woman whose boundaries had been crossed and you were angry?" She said, "Oh no, I felt like an adult whose boundaries had been crossed." I said, "Okay, so that's activated. That's not triggered. If you felt like a little girl in that moment, you would have been triggered. But you weren't. You were justifiably angry that she was treating you like a child, and
Right.
that's not okay." So that allowed, because one is passive and the other is something that we are in charge of, right? And that is speaking to us and teaching us something now. All emotions are a design, you know, they're a lesson. There's something to learn. If you're angry, it's because somebody has, you know, taken advantage or crossed your boundaries or whatever. There's a lesson for you in what you can allow with that person, or whether that person should even be in your environment. If you're sad, if you're experiencing grief, it's there to teach you how much you loved that person or that thing that you're now missing, right? So there's a lesson in it. And the sooner you learn the lesson, the sooner you can move on from those uncomfortable emotions. If you're experiencing joy, the lesson is do more of that. Right? All right. So we get to learn these lessons. But when we're triggered, it's our body telling us that that's not healed. That's not healed. That our unconscious believes that to still be a current event. Because when I work with people and we turn off these loops, they don't get triggered anymore. They'll get angry if somebody crosses their boundary, but they're not triggered anymore. So they'll remember that experience, and instead of feeling emotional charge, they'll remember that it was crap, but they don't experience any pain at the remembering.
Got you. Okay. So how does past trauma affect current parenting and relationships?
Okay. So if you're again stuck in a heightened nervous system state and you're always looking for threat, you will perceive threat in places where threat doesn't exist. And that's your nervous system trying to keep you safe. You're not broken. You're just looking for threat because you're stuck in activation mode. So when you're a parent, particularly, you know, if when you were a kid, it was, if you spoke back, you'd get a backhand, right? That's trauma in your body. So if a child speaks, like as a parent, then if your child speaks back to you or back chats, your whole nervous system perceives danger, right? It perceives danger in a way that doesn't even feel it's not appropriate to this situation, right? So when we then react rather than respond, we react from that place of fear and lack of safety, and we might lash out at our children instead of sitting and having a normal conversation with them about what might be appropriate and why perhaps if instead of back chatting, they asked a question, it would be a better way to have that conversation. And also just knowing that children are going to push boundaries and that that's a normal developmental thing, and how we handle that is important, right? And it's our job to be the adult, not theirs. Right? So you know, but that can then impact your relationship with your child and pass the trauma on. If it's in relationships, you know, if let's say you were cheated on and you're in a new relationship now, but you might constantly be looking for signs that you're being cheated on again. Right? And then so you undermine your relationship to keep you safe, to push the other person away so that you're not going to get hurt again, you know. Right. And it's all unconscious. We don't even do it consciously.
Right. Yeah, I can see that, you know, because it's a lot of things. It's just like you said, you know, the whole trauma thing, like that was traumatizing to you. And it's like, it's almost like every situation you get in, it's like your mind saying it's danger, danger, you know? And subconsciously, because I don't think nobody consciously goes into every situation like, oh, you know, it's just embedded in their mind. I think, you know, so that's the tough thing about relationships or parenting when you deal with these traumas or these fears, because it's like sometimes it hinders you, it gets in the way of a lot of things. And from the outside looking in, that person may not understand, and they might look at it like this person is so standoffish, you know, not understanding or not knowing that you are dealing with things or you have dealt with things. So yeah, it's crazy how powerful the mind is. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's hugely powerful, and we're you know, science is only just catching up with what we've always intuitively known, and that's that our thoughts impact our body. But they also, you know, it also runs everything, right? The unconscious is running the patterns in your life, all of the pieces, and unless we are aware of what's happening, we can then take that on as personal failing. We can blame ourselves instead of understanding that it's actually our nervous system protecting us. It's an ancient system that is designed to keep us safe from the tiger, from the snakes, from the, you know, like all of those things. It's designed that way to keep us safe. The problem is it's looking for threat everywhere because of the experiences that we've had. And so depending on your patterns and your experiences, you'll often find that there's a huge amount of your life which is impacted by these things you're not even aware of going on. Once you know how to find the pattern though, and what the unconscious belief is locking in that pattern, it's actually not a hard fix.
Right.
But if you liken it to, I don't know if your car's got lane assist. My car has lane assist, so I can, you know, it'll keep me in the lane when I'm driving down the highway. And if I don't put the indicator on to change lanes, I'm literally fighting the car to change, right? Yeah. So and that's your unconscious beliefs. Those unconscious beliefs were set when you were a kid. It's like you set the safe lane when you were a kid, and so you're going to keep traveling down that road. And that's great, except that you may not, those unconscious beliefs may not be serving you anymore, right? If you grew up, so let's say you're a girl who grew up in a home where you had an abusive parent, and you know you might have been emotionally or physically abused. You don't have the option to fight back, right? When you're 5, you can't fight back against an adult. You're going to lose. You're going to get hurt worse. You also don't have the option to run because you don't know what's out there or how to fend for yourself. So you adapt, and your primary connection, your primary driver at that point is connection for safety. And so, you know, if in those years you then develop ways to stay hidden, maybe it was actually safer to be really quiet, to not speak your mind, to have, you know, to hide or to manage the other people around you. You know, you might manage your siblings' behavior so that they stay quiet and don't rile up the beast. You know, you might have to look after that said parent, you know, in order to keep them pliable and not have them lose it, and so you become a people pleaser, and you become passive, and you become an enabler, and all of these other things, which when you were a kid, that kept you safe. But as a 45-year-old woman or a 55-year-old woman or a 60, like, that's not going to serve you, right? But you're doing it anyway because that's what your unconscious believes will keep you safe. So we got to change those.
Right. How can women reclaim vitality?
Well, first of all, do the work. Do the work to shift how all of this sits in the back end. And people, if you tell me that you're too busy, I'm not buying it. Wearing busy like a badge is part of your problem. If your best friend asked you to find 3 2-hour sessions to take her to the oncology department over the next few weeks, you'd find it. You would make it happen, right? You would drop everything and go and help your friend. We can all find time for the things that are important to us. I made time. I took 2 weeks off work and I made time to do it. Now, I didn't need to take 2 weeks off work, but I was exhausted. So I took 2 weeks off work and I actually made it happen. Now, I had to schedule it in, but I did it, right? So, we all have time. It's the one equalizer. Everybody's got the same amount of it. So start thinking about yourself as your best asset rather than as the last person to get fed, to get washed, to get all the other things. This is actually about you shuffling where you sit in your priority list. So that's the first step. So making a conscious decision that you're going to prioritize yourself, as hard as it feels and as foreign as it feels. Find someone to do the work with, and then really lean into at every point, is this serving me? Is this serving me? And understanding that you get to choose that, right? So looking after your body physically, your nutrition, eating. In perimenopause and menopause, your body requires completely different energy than it did when you were a kid. When I was 20, when I was 18, I could eat half a chocolate cake and it wouldn't impact me at all, right? Today, if I did that, that's a no-go, right? And I don't even like that anymore. Like, I'll have chocolate cake sitting on my bench. I won't even touch it. I'm not attracted to it anymore. My body wants protein. My body wants fiber. My body wants things that are going to nourish my gut, right? And give me sustainable energy. My body wants leafy greens. My 22-year-old body didn't care about that, but my 48-year-old body does. And so nourishing ourselves well, both emotionally and physically, but you've got to see yourself as an asset. If you're not here because you haven't looked after yourself, you don't serve anyone at all, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what comes to mind when I say ambition versus survival?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, well, if we think about my story, right? So I was in survival mode. When I had my second burnout with my brain aneurysm, I'd been working 7 days a week. I was working crazy long hours. I was leading a team. I had a $16 million a year sales budget and a sales team to run. I had, I had a lot of pressure. I had 4 children. My husband was doing stay-at-home dad stuff at the time. But I still had a lot on my plate, right? And so but I was running from survival. I thought I needed to prove myself. And I worked really hard and moved my family like 6 times, including overseas, to pursue that position. And I got there. I got there really quickly compared to others. But I burnt myself out in the process. And then because I wasn't, with the brain aneurysm, they're like, you need to have less stress. So I had to give up everything I'd fought for, everything I'd worked hard for and sacrificed for. I had to give that up. So then I ended up taking a job that was 6 days a week. I was like, all right, well, I'll take on less stress. So I gave myself a day back to do all the other things, right? And then I burnt out properly with that one, with the adrenal fatigue. And I was doing at the time, because I was not only doing 50 hours a week at work, I was doing a bachelor's degree in social science. I was doing a Cert 4 in financial services for my workplace. I was parenting 4 children and going through the diagnosis process for autism and ADHD for them. And so all of that was happening at the same time. And once we got that diagnosis through for my first, all of a sudden I went, okay, now I know what it is. Now I can just learn how to help her. And it turns out all 4 of them are. But that was when the adrenal fatigue then came on. I was in survival. I was doing busy as a state of being to prove that I was worthy and that I was of value. Today, I still do a lot of stuff. Like I have 3 businesses, right? Like, and I'm creating this whole new way of connecting coaches and educators, etc., to their audience, right? I have this incredible new system that I've developed. That's come though from my abundance. That's come from my desire to be creative and to meet a need. And I had to fix my own problem, right, of reaching my audience in a way that they will consume now, because they're not doing the same thing they used to do. And so my creativity then bounced into a new business, and I brought the right team around me and started leaning into that. So I haven't lost any ambition. But if I want to go and sit on my back deck and look out over my beautiful green, park, as one of my friends calls it, I have 7 acres. I can go and do that with my cup of tea and feel fine about doing that.
Right.
I haven't lost my ambition to impact the world in a really big way. I'm up for a global award right at the moment. Like none of that ambition is gone, but it's not coming from a place of I have to prove myself. It's coming from a desire to give and contribute.
Got you. Now you said contribute, so we're still in the month of March. So as I've been doing, to celebrate and to honor women for Women's History Month, I just want to give you your flowers and tell you that I appreciate you for your contributions and anything that you do for yourself or for the community or for your family. So, pat yourself on the back, because women are one of God's greatest creations. It wouldn't be no men without women, It wouldn't be happiness or sanity or balance without a woman. So again, I just want to give you your flowers.
Oh, thank you.
Now, does modern corporate leadership praise true ambition, or does it thrive on the unresolved trauma and perfectionism of high functioning women?
Oh, that's a great question. You nailed it. It absolutely thrives on our unresolved trauma. Culturally, we praise, because I was significantly rewarded for my performance pre-burnouts, right? Significantly. I was making great money. I was winning awards. I was going on trips. I had all the accolades, right? I was being rewarded for killing myself slowly, right? And we do that all the time. We actually don't set up our culture in corporate, particularly, to be to have any balance. We're asking people to spend more time working than they do with their family and with their, or resting. We praise people who only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, right? That's actually not better for your capacity. You don't get better work outcomes. They've proven that. There's a great book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He talks about how that whole structure is actually, if you're only getting 4 or 5 hours sleep or less even, you are not as effective as somebody who gets a full allocation of sleep. You're just not as effective. So you're there, but your output isn't as good, right? So one of my gifts to myself is I give myself at least a 9-hour sleep opportunity every night.
Ooh, 9 hours. Jeez.
Yep, every night. Now, I don't always sleep for all of that, because every perimenopausal woman knows that because your cortisol levels peak between 2 and 4 in the morning, they're not meant to, but in perimenopause they do. You often have this wakeful time between 2 and 4, and so you're not necessarily sleeping all the way through anymore. And look, that'll go away again, but so for me, I use it as time for meditating or thinking about what my future will look like, and forward planning, right? So if I do happen to, if I'm conscious enough for that. But so I give myself that sleep opportunity. And one of my greatest gifts, and it doesn't happen all the time, obviously, with school and everything else, but I love to be able to wake up without an alarm and just wake up when my body says so, right? Now, it doesn't happen every day, but I love when it does. And I'm just so grateful when I get to, and I often wake up before my alarm anyway, which again, I take that as a win. I've had enough sleep that my body's like, yeah, okay, we're good. Up you get, So yeah, but culturally we are not doing that, and we are, and big business is profiting off it. And then you know what they do, as soon as you get to be perimenopausal and you're not prepared to put up with the crap in the same way anymore, they just get rid of you. And this is the thing that we don't, and I did it too. Like, I flogged myself for years, and as soon as I wasn't able to be there anymore, it didn't impact them at all. They just moved on. Right. But I had given up so much of my health and my life and my children's experiences for that. They don't actually care. You are not irreplaceable to anyone but yourself and your family. And we need to shift that. We need to start seeing that for what it is.
Right. Now you mentioned rest, right? Proper resting and giving your body time to rest, right? So I feel like that's a good segue to this next question I was going to ask, right? It's dealing with workplace rest versus performance, right? Now I feel like this is a good question I'm about to ask. Does the hustle culture make healing an unattainable luxury for high performing women?
No, it doesn't make it unattainable. It just means you have to choose it outside of the culture that you're in. So if you're inside that culture, you need to think about whether or not your environment is. So Bruce Lipton discovered decades ago that our cells have 2 switches, right? Shut down, survival, or thriving and growing. There's nothing in between. It's one or the other. And whether you're in survival or thriving is determined by your environment. So that switch, it's your environment, and it might be your workplace, your geographic location, it might be your thoughts, it could be your relationships. All of those things in your environment will cause you to be on or off. Now, if your environment is impacting you and you do nothing about your environment, that is your decision. You get to choose that, but you also get to choose something else. And so it might be that you need to, and I had to do this. I ended up working for Judith Richards, who created the TRTP process, and I ran her business for a while. And it was an incredible experience. And ultimately, I started my own practice because I actually want to be in charge of. Now, I don't work less. I don't spend, but I spend time doing the things that light me up and that allow my creativity. And I get to just, over Christmas, I was on an 84-day cycle, right? So when you're perimenopausal, your menstrual cycle can go all over the shop. It can be 2 weeks or 6 months. You just don't know. It becomes a guessing game. And I one of the things I learned through that cycle is it was Christmas, everything shut down. My husband's a tradie, so they shut down over Christmas time typically, and they don't work. And everybody around me's resting and rejuvenating, and I'm sitting at the computer with all of these, courses pouring out of me for things that I want to help women in perimenopause with. I created this really cool program called the Becoming Portal, and I was like, why am I not resting? And I was like, I'm clearly at a place in my cycle where I've got creativity and drive. And when my cycle came, I stopped for a week because my body I didn't have the energy for it. My body was doing other things. And so that neither is wrong, but when you're following your body and your body's saying, yeah, we're in a good spot for this right now, let's do this. When there's excitement and you're energized for it, that's a very different place to be in than trudging through, right? And having to have resilience. I don't have to have resilience to get up in the morning and, jump on a podcast with someone like you. I don't have to have resilience to put out a course that comes to me and that, is a collection of wisdom. I don't need resilience for that, right? But if you're in a place of needing to be resilient all the time, then that's an environment issue, and you need to think about it because nobody else can control your environment except you. But you have a choice.
Gotcha. So is the societal praise of organized and competent women actually punishing them by encouraging the suppression of vulnerability?
Can you say that again?
So I said, is the societal praise of organized and competent women, like emphasis on organized and competent, is it actually punishing them for encouraging the suppression of vulnerability?
Yeah, 100%. If we, especially as a Gen X woman, if you are seen to be vulnerable, there's a lack of safety there. And again, it comes back to your unconscious beliefs, right? If your unconscious believes you not to be safe, then placing yourself, because vulnerability takes trust and it takes courage. And if you don't have the other stuff set up around you, if you don't have a support system, if you don't have the tools and so on, then you're placing yourself in a position of real vulnerability, and that can be not safe for some people. And if we are looking, if we're praising, she's so organized, she gets stuff done, and oh my God, I have been there, right? Like we have that saying, if you want something done, ask a busy woman, right? I was that person, and you know what? I'd get it done. I was super organized. And it's funny, people would say to me, how do you get out of the house? How do you get all this done with 4 kids? And I'm like, hold on. When I had my first baby, I couldn't get out of the house before 3:00 in the afternoon. And I learned by the time I had 4, I could get out of the house with all of us done before 8:00 and so on, right? But I learned along the way. But being organized is great as long as it's the right fit. But if we're having to be resilient in that space, if we've got so much stacked in that we are unable to do life without being super organized and having all these systems and everything else, then we need to perhaps look at what have we taken on that we could say no to or get help with, But yeah, we're absolutely punishing women if they're vulnerable, and we're putting people on a pedestal if they're doing great,
Right.
in terms of organized and pushing through.
Right. And that's the thing about labels, I think, what we make societal norms here, it's like, it's like almost like taking the human out of humans, right? It's like this is who you have to be. It's like putting each other in a box. This is who you have to be. This is who you should be, and if not, then you're failing, right? So I think a lot of times these pressures get put on women to where they feel like they always got to be strong, or they have to act in the masculine all the time, and they neglect their vulnerabilities, or they deny their vulnerabilities, right? And I know with men, we often say we're not vulnerable. That's a word that a lot of men are afraid to embrace, but it's just a human quality. We all have vulnerabilities, right? We got to know how to channel that. We know how to balance that, and we just got to be aware of the vulnerabilities. It's just being human, and it's not a weakness. A lot of people look at vulnerability as a weakness, so that's what it is. The society, we put so many labels out there, and it's almost like programming us. If you're not this, you fail. Right.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of, just to touch on what you said there, we do talk about the masculine and the feminine, right? And
right.
and I think one of the things and feminism has given us some incredible things, right? Being able to vote and those sorts of things. But and it should never have had to come to that, right? It should have just been a given. But what I think we lost is, and a lot of men who are married to these women who are Gen X, a lot of these Gen X men were also brought up by, feminist mothers who, and I think for the first time, a lot of those men didn't understand how to be in their masculine as well. And so a lot of the women that I work with, they've had to step into the masculine because the man in their life doesn't step into the masculine. So somebody's got to do that. And so it's not out of desire, but out of necessity. And so, there's a lot of men out there who have also been, disserved, I guess, in their own life, so that it now impacts the relationships and how all of that moves forward. And women, somebody said to me the other day, actually it's probably close to 2 years ago now that I think about it, she said, I know I have to surrender to the feminine, but I'm scared to. And I said to her, hold on, women don't surrender to the feminine. Men do. Men surrender to the feminine, but women don't. Women have to pick it up and put it on like it's a cloak. This is where your power sits. But being in the feminine requires you to be a receiver as well, and it requires you to be creative. It requires you to lean into your what are your best attributes, and be willing to shoulder that. Being in your masculine is just about fitting into the world where it sits right now. And in some instances we need to do that, but being able to switch that off and come home to be feminine and to be a receiver, or to actually enact femininity within your corporate environment, but do it with power.
Right.
That's that's something that takes strength and training. I think that's part of what I work with.
So I'm glad you said strength. This is the thing, the feminine is a superpower. That's all it is. Like the best attributes in life, whether it's coming from a man or a woman, comes from the feminine, right? Nourishment, nurturing, caring, compassion, all the things that we equate to feminism are powers. Once you're able to harness that and put forth, these characteristics I'm saying, then you're looked upon as powerful, as dominant, as the greatest of humankind, if you think about it, right? And that's why I said women are the greatest. They're like the best thing that God created, right? Because without y'all, men wouldn't know how to be caring and loving and things of that nature, right? Like, not to not to talk about religion, but like, God is love, right? And once you have love, you have everything. And women are love is love personified, you know? And yeah, so it's a superpower. Every greatest attribute comes from a woman.
Well, I think you're underestimating men. I think men
No,
have
I'm
men
not
have
saying we don't have superpowers.
yeah, no. I think men have a great capacity for love. I think men actually feel emotion far deeper than we give them credit for. Um,
Mm.
and if you look into the work of Alison Armstrong, she talks about that in her books. That men actually have an incredible capacity for love and for feeling. And the problem is that, again, culturally, we have said that that's a feminine attribute versus a male attribute, and we have cultured men to not feel their feelings or not admit to their feelings or to have to be stoic all the time. And I think that if we can, I think men, I believe, were, they have incredible leadership capacity. They're like um, they're ultimately, they're like a foundation strength, right? So you need strength in your walls, but you need strength in the foundation. And one of the things that I think, if we as women have the capacity to, and not every woman is married to a man who can give that, but I've often been accused of being aggressive or whatever. I'm not ever aggressive. I'm assertive, but I'm not aggressive. But people think that my relationship with my husband, I'm the boss, right? And in some ways, I take a leadership role because that he refuses to. But actually, it takes an incredibly strong man, and a man who's incredibly sure of himself, to be the foundation for a woman who has desire and ambition and strength of her own. A weak man can hold a woman who has no desires or doesn't want to be anything for herself. A strong man is somebody who can hold a woman who has that. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to acknowledge that
Right.
my husband is my he holds me steady, right? When I go out and I change the world, and nobody will look up his name at the end of all of this and go, what did he do to change the world? I certainly hope that they do for me, because I feel like I've done some things already, but I've got more to go. But that what I see is that without him, I wouldn't have had the foundation to spring from. He holds me
Gotcha.
steady. Yeah.
So, does the expectation that women must carry the primary mental load of caregiving inhibit their ability to heal from past trauma?
I don't know that I think it doesn't stop it, but it can make it difficult, because, again, we're cultured to be the giver, to put ourselves last, to be the ones who, we give up everything for our kids and so on. And I don't I agree you can have your cake and eat it too. I just don't think you can have it all at the same time. Um, you know, women are not allowed to, if you go back to work with young kids, you're doing the wrong thing. If you don't go back to work, you're doing the wrong thing. If you look after your body, you're doing the wrong thing, because your kids aren't the priority. And if you are, then you're, or if you're not, then you're not doing the right thing. Like, there's just so much guilt that women experience as mothers, that society places on them. It's almost like it doesn't matter. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, like, you can't get it right as far as culture is concerned. So when I'm leaning into teaching women about identity as a mother, and so I now consider myself to be I've been a birth doula for 22 years, but I call myself a maternal transitions doula, right? Because those transitions happen over and over and over again, and we are constantly required to reshape ourselves in what I call the mother awakening cycle. We're constantly required to reshape ourselves, and it's really hard to do in a culture that has so many expectations of mothers. And yet, so we are doing what everybody would call the most important job in the world, right? And that's the pedestal they put it on, but they provide zero support.
Right.
Zero support, zero community. I've spent 20 years helping mothers learn how to create community and learn how to support each other, because we are not like when my mum was bringing us up, she had the church, right? She had a built-in community in her church, and most people don't have that anymore. Most people don't even know who their neighbors are, right? Because they drive
Right.
into their driveway and they drive into their garage and they park their car and the roller door goes down before they're even out of the car and they walk in through the inside. And they don't even know their neighbors. And they might have 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 Instagram followers. But if you don't have someone to call at 2 o'clock in the morning to come and watch your kids so that you can take your husband to the doctors, you don't have a tribe. And
Right.
so, but we are not creating that for women. We are not giving them the support that they need to be able to do this most important job in the world. We are handing them a baby and saying, here you go, figure it out. But don't ask for help, and don't expect anybody to show up with a meal or come and fold your washing. When my daughter had her baby nearly 3 years ago now, I slept. She was doing it on her own. She's a single mum. I slept with them for the first 2 weeks. She didn't change the baby's nappy for 3 days. Her only job was to learn how to feed that little baby, right? And to cuddle and to rest. And then day 4, I showed her how to put her clothes on. And then around day 10, we gave her a bath and I showed her how to do that. And I fed her for 2 years and I did her washing for 8 months. She just got given little pieces at a time. Little pieces that she could add so that she could figure out who she was in this space, so that she could be supported and feel loved and feel like she was doing the most important job that there was. But not everybody has me across the driveway, and a lot of mothers and grandmothers are still working, and and they lean away from that because nobody gave it to them, rather than leaning in and going, how do I impact the next generation for something better? How do we do better than what we got?
It's important. It's important. Is it possible to heal from chronic burnout while remaining in a high pressure career?
Yes, it is. I did it. I did TRTP, which meant that it was a very short, it's 2 weeks, 15 days from first session to last session. I was not the kind of person, as you might be able to tell, I'm not the kind of person who has or wants to spend loads of time, talking things out over and over and over again, right? It's not who I am. I didn't have time for that. I needed to be able to get back to my life and my kids. So I chose a modality that was fast and effective. And I did hours and hours and hours of research, and I landed on this and I did it. And I got an incredible result. And then I went back to my corporate job, and I still was like, I eventually changed my environment, but it took months for me to be able to do that, and for me to find the next thing that was going to work for me. But even how I existed within that environment changed, and my resilience was able, because again, remember, I was sitting at a calm nervous system. Everything wasn't danger anymore. So I was able to exist there without constantly overriding myself.
Now we was talking about rest before, right? Is the inability to rest a failure of self-care or a direct psychological outcome of a nervous system that has been conditioned to stay on high alert?
Yep, it's that. It's part of its culture, as we talked about before, but most of it is an autonomic nervous system that doesn't feel safe to rest. It's in that fight, flight, space. And then some people, like if they're stuck in freeze, they're in that depression state and they feel lazy, or they're told that they're not doing enough and they rest all the time, right? But then it's not actually restorative, right? They're tired and they sleep, but they don't get any, they're not actually, they don't feel rested. And that's all because of your autonomic nervous system. It's running everything,
Right.
and you're not even aware of it.
Now, one of your taglines that was on your website said, it's not about trying harder. It's about resolving what taught your body to stay on guard in the first place. Can you speak on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So we're cultured to think that if we just try a little harder, push a little longer, we'll fix everything or everything will change. That assumes that the reason we're in this position is because of outside influences. And if that worked, everybody would be different. But it doesn't work, and they're not different. What we actually need to do is, again, turn off those unconscious core beliefs that are not serving us and rewrite them with ones that will serve us. If your unconscious core belief is I need to be doing to be of value, then you need to rewrite that. I choose to know that my value comes from being, not from doing. Right? So rewriting those is crucial, and getting your nervous system to a place of calm. So you live from calm and then you respond, rather than, always being in high activation.
Got you. So it's not a weakness, it's an adaptation. What is the difference between coping and completion?
So a lot of therapies out there will give you coping tools or managing tools. They want you to, they want to skill you to be able to deal with and exist in the space that you're in, right? What we want to do is we actually want to just turn all of that stuff off so that we can work the way we're meant to work. Like if we resolve the loop, if we turn them off, if we complete the cycle, if we complete the loop that's in your brain and turn it off, that's when we can then move forward from, it's like if you finish the cake and then start a new one, right? That you've completed one thing and you're moving into a new state, but you've got a fresh kitchen, right? You've got a fresh plate to start from, rather than keeping on tweaking the cake with something else and hoping that you'll get something different, right? Like, yeah, we need to, once we've completed, we get to start anew. And that's what we're doing when we reset the nervous system. It's like a factory reset on your phone. Have you ever done that, when you have to reset your mobile phone and everything just wipes off and it goes back to how it's supposed to be working? That's what we're doing when we're completing. We do a reset.
Gotcha. Okay. So before we close out, is there anything else you would like to add as far as perimenopause or unresolved trauma or anything?
Look, I think we've covered a lot of that stuff. I guess the takeaway is you're not broken.
Right.
You're not broken. Everything in your system is working the way it's meant to. It's just got old stories and it's existing from a place that has trauma still. And so your body isn't sabotaging you. It's doing everything it can to keep you safe. So if you operate out of just that one piece of knowledge, that can change how you perceive yourself and whether you're failing or not. But your system isn't trying to harm you. It's trying to keep you safe. You're not broken. And there is so much support and help out there. If nothing else, jump on the website and do the burnout audit. See where you are. Get in contact. Let's have a half an hour phone conversation. Let's see what path is going to be right for you moving forward. In the next little while, I hope to have that becoming portal up on my website. I just haven't managed to load all the videos up yet. But it'll be a great way for you to to relearn some of this stuff and to get some extra pieces. But who you are and who you get to be, that you get to choose. Animals don't get to choose, but you do. We can override our unconscious instincts, but we need to simply replace what's in there right now that's not working for you with good stuff. Have you seen that analogy that it went around Facebook and TikTok and wherever a few years back, but they were like, imagine somebody bumps into you and spills your coffee. Did that person spill your coffee? No, that person bumped into you, and what you had in your cup was coffee. Now, if somebody bumped into you and what you had in your cup was water and that spilled, well, that wouldn't be anywhere near as big a deal as the coffee, right?
Right.
So if somebody bumps you and you're spilling coffee everywhere, it's because there's shit in there that needs to be dealt with. If somebody bumps you and it's just a bit of water, great. You don't have to deal with any of that stuff. But for most of us, we've just got coffee in our cup and we need to replace it with water. And so that's the work I do.
Okay. Sounds good. So it's been an honor, privilege, and a pleasure to have you on today. You're more than welcome to come on for any future discussions. I often have repeat, guests. I welcome all. But that's going to conclude today's episode. We hope everybody enjoyed it, took something away from it, gained a little bit of knowledge, a little insight. Just continue to share, like, comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all the love and support, and I'm gonna keep doing this as long as you guys, keep coming on the show and keep showing that support. So I'm going to close out for the day. Miss Scott, you enjoy the rest of your day. What time is it there?
It is currently 10:22 a.m.
Okay, jeez. So it's 8:22 p.m. here.
Well, have a good night's sleep, Desmond, and thank you for having me.
No problem. So be blessed and have a good night.
Thank you.
Or the rest of your day, because it's early for you.
Thank you very much.
No problem.